Hi friends, host Eric here with host She, aka J to the Nizel, and we've got a blankie in attendance who's blanking it up with a question about the changing of type over time. So first, let's make a distinction between different ways that might be meant. First, you might say, "Oh, I used to be an ENTP, but now I've changed into an INTP." That's one possible way to mean it. Another possible way to mean it is I'm changing my expression of ENTP ishness based on changes due to metacognition, which I think is another thing entirely, right? So, addressing the first thing, I don't think a person's type changes over time. I think if you're an ENTP at 6 or 7 years old, then you're an ENTP for the rest of your life. And I think it's unavoidably so because they're habitual manners of attention, and you can't really change that. You can prioritize some over the others. You can get in the habit of being aware more of ones that you're not habitually conscious of. You can certainly be aware of how other people's manners of attention and habits of attention relate to your own, but you're unlikely to be able to change what was habituated into your hardware, basically. You're that kind of machine. Once you've set your type, it means you're defaulting to any for me. I can try to minimize that. I can try to maximize. I can do things with it, but it's still the same kind of machine. For my version of the machine, it's like I've revved up its unbalanced aspect to the detriment of the other half of the unbalanced aspect. So my NESI is more unbalanced than most ENTPs. Every ENTP's NESI is unbalanced, and they're all inversely proportional. Mine is way, way, way more NE and way, way, way less SI than most ENTPs. This past week or two has been way more SI for me, and as a consequence, I've been around here a lot less. But the reason I don't think you change type, as I said, is that when you have a default state of being, it's nearly impossible for you to conceive of what it would be like to be in a different default state of being unless something really traumatic happens. Like when my dog died, I shifted into SI mode for about a week. That's all I did was SI stuff. Helped me to SI and FI. The FI was involuntary. I didn't understand it, it just hurt like hell. And I just SI'd my way through it. It was the only tool I had, and it was an emergency. And I found it was natural to do. It was like I settled right into, okay, I know how to do this. I know how to fix this. I got to SI the shit out of myself. I got to really pamper myself, take care of myself, which means a lot of times working on in my environment. It's not necessarily easy street or whatever. So, um, in that manner, you can change type over time, and I think that everybody individuates into their own ergonomically fit spread of manners of attention in certain circumstances, and the extent to which they're engaged in active discourse about it, like this, having conversations about it, asking questions and listening to me, blah blah blah, and then taking whatever pieces of that you find useful and incorporating them into your own understanding of things, and or engaging in the process of rejecting parts of it by making argumentation. That's even more powerful way to change um, your own thinking and mine as well to the betterment of both. So, regardless, it's engaging in the discourse that is the process-oriented thing that matters. It's the engine of the process that makes one optimize rather than de-optimize or settle into a rut or something. Now, granted, the optimization is going to be largely metaphysical for a certain period of time. I think to the extent that it needs to manifest as changes in the physical world, it will do so as critical mass develops. So if you're somebody who really needs to take some sort of action that you're not doing, um, eventually, if it becomes pressing enough, it'll start coming up in your discourse, and it'll, like Barry was saying about the TWFP hive mind, tends to seize upon real problems or real things that might have real world manifestations and throw a lot of mental energy at them. Not necessarily a lot of physical world energy, but that all that mental energy can produce um, weirdly significant things. For example, me keeping talking about Magic Sky Friend produced Barry showing me how to turn on auto subtitle, auto subtitle it, like because it's the first step of Magic Sky Friend. Now, there's a lot of incidental stuff that goes along with the fact there's auto subtitling, but most importantly, it makes it conceivable that we might download all those text files and somehow cross-index and then allow for a parametric search of the variety that I imagine as a stage of Magic Sky Friendhood. We'd have to have some sort of an app that was able to distinguish between people, though. So it could say who's doing the speaking. What are we talking about?
We're talking about how a chain or how a type
Any thoughts?
develops over time. I was just going to ask if you knew of, or if you could like compare. So this person is wanting to know like how a type would look when they're significantly older, so like 55 plus. Like, do you know of a certain type that is like
I think there's a
older versus one that's super young and
I
like the
think there are
differences they have?
different types display aging differently and in predictable ways. I think it's a good question. I think like my ISFJ mom, she tended towards when she was younger, she was more adventurous. As she got older, she got less and less adventurous. She got less and less comfortable with change and newness, and became more and more locked into her SI, and gradually fell into some mental ruts. And I think that's why she's mentally deteriorating. Whereas my dad, with TE first, is not, because he's continued to present himself with various problems to effectively solve, and most of all, like sort of the family estate kind of a shit, you know. So um, I think that ISFJs and ISTJs will go downhill earlier, will stop growing sooner. And I think once a human mind stops growing, it basically starts dying. My dad is still doing uh my dad is still doing shit like solving issues, you know. He's still growing in a way. He's kind of stagnated in a lot of his thinking, but he's got a real problem on his hands, which is mom. Mom's going downhill, and he's got to make sure that he. I mean, he shows her how much he loves her and appreciates her, which is exactly what he's doing. He's got this sort of like bucket list thing they're going on doing, and it's really sad to talk about. Anyway, he's doing what dad has always done, which is he shows he cares about you by making shit happen and making sure everything's taken care of. And he's doing that for mom. And mom was a big a big part of keeping all the shit together and doing all the paperwork and stuff. But my dad always was a big part of it too. But you know, he's shifting all that burden onto himself now, and it's fine because he's got nothing else to do, you know. And I don't know, I don't know where I'm going with that. He hasn't changed much over time in a lot of ways. He's exactly the same as he was. Although he's mellowed for sure. He was very angry when I was little. I remember him being a very angry figure in my life, but not truly scary. He never hit me, and never threatened to hit me, and almost always apologized after he got mad at me. Sometime, son, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have yelled at you like that. It's okay, Dad. I'd already forgotten about it because I'm an ENTP. I don't hold grudges. It didn't really matter that much to me. But what did matter to me was his habit of apologizing. And my mom did the same thing. And so I learned that as well, that you have to be responsible when you're at fault for something like that by stepping up and going, I'm sorry I did that. So it's something I still do today. Like the Chinese lady at the walnut place. It took me a couple weeks to finally really get around to it, but I did eventually apologize for yelling at her that one time that I yelled at her when I should have been yelling at her boss. And I was yelling at the wrong lady, and she totally didn't deserve that. And so, anyway, I apologize for it. I don't know, like last week or something. Because you should. I don't know, because I was raised like that. Both my parents did that. Both of them were exceedingly fair in everything they did with me. They heard all my arguments. If I was right, they tried to agree with me. It's a weird childhood because I was dealing with reasonable people, which I've discovered out in the world is not always the case. Anyway, I've changed a lot over time because, again, I've mellowed like my dad has. I think a lot of types mellow if they're kind of fighty types. ESTJ certainly is. My dad's super competitive, and you start to have more empathy and sympathy and other things like that. I gotta go. This Kimberly. Hello. Give me a second. I'm in the middle of making a video, but just give me 1 second. Thanks for watching Talk with Friends, people. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese, and sorry to be abrupt in cutting this off, but I need to have this conversation. I gotta go to work pretty soon anyway. Bye.